Hello and welcome to another segment of He Calls Me Deborah, beaming a light of hope. Thank you for joining. We continue our discussion on Dr. John Townsend's book, Who's Pushing Your Buttons? Who's Pushing Your Buttons? Handling the difficult people in your life. In earlier segments, we've spoken of the fact that the difficult people in our lives are often important to us. They can be very important, in fact. We've discussed that strategies that we try ourselves, the things we do, maybe not necessarily a strategy, but the things that we do, which in fact often just make the situation worse. And so in his book, he suggests instead using resources that you have that have been proven successful in his counseling practice, and we call those strategies. He's identified 7. In earlier segments, we've spoken and we've reviewed 4 through the first 4. We've reviewed first, number 1, resource God, being God, and how He's on the button pusher's side just as well as He's on yours, because God doesn't show favoritism. However, that doesn't mean that He agrees with your button pusher's stances. And in fact, God takes very clearly defined positions on many issues that you deal with a button pusher, such as deception, that is addressed in Psalms 101:7, a lack of love, Matthew 24:12, selfishness, you can find scripture in James 3:16, and irresponsibility, Proverbs 20, verse 4. Think back again to the concept of reaping and sowing. We've talked about how in Galatians 6, God's word says, "Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows." For every action, there is a consequence. You're free to choose, but you're not free of these consequences. And Townsend says that if we sow love, humility, and responsibility, that we should reap those things in return. If we fail to, however, reap love in return for love, humility in return for humility, responsibility in return for responsibility, that we're going to experience some disconnect, some reactions to our pride and losses. And he's saying that those are natural consequences that we should expect to experience. Our second resource or strategy suggested was resource number 2, your life. You and your life are an agent for change with your button pusher. You can influence and accomplish much in the way that you live, the way that you operate in the world, and in this relationship. The relationship itself has power that you may not be aware of. It's a matter of light and darkness. Townsend explains that the more you own your own life, the more your own life is exposed fully to love, to truth, and the growth process, the more that you become light. And as a result, as you're becoming light, you're going to see movement either in one direction or another from your button pusher. Your person is going to be forced to change positions, one way or the other. Toward the light, they'll move closer toward you, toward the light, or they're going to move away from it into continued hiding, resistance, and avoidance of exposure. And then there's the resource of safe and sane relationships. For resource number 3, here Townsend urges readers to surround themselves with good people who will remind them that they're not alone and that their experiences are also shared by others. These people will provide a sounding board. They'll also provide grounding, direction, and the grace of God when you are struggling. Using the analogy of information technology, Townsend says that these people can be like your own operating system. These people will give you the acceptance, the understanding, and the feedback for growth that you need. And he suggests that you think of those people as your personal Delta force. Good mentors, pastors, counselors, and therapists can be a big help, providing the normalization, the wisdom, shared experiences, and perspective. They can help you to hold the hard lines that are designed to bring about change in your button pusher. Galatians chapter 6, verse 2 encourages us to carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. So it's biblical to carry burdens for one another, to provide that support, to provide those shared experiences and perspective. Resource number 4 was our stance. Examine your own attitude toward your button pusher. What is your point of view toward them? Stance is your broad guiding attitude that helps you to decide, to choose, and experience emotions toward a person. So what are your feelings about your button pusher? When you care about someone, you take a stance of grace. That's steady, it's unfailing, it's unswerving love. For example, what you're telling them is, I am for you and I am for us. But it's reciprocal. There's a reciprocity in that. No one can successfully execute real change without the grace and support of others to help them along the way. Grace doesn't mean agreement with your button pusher's behavior, and it doesn't disperse rescue either. And that's important to remember that. Again, it doesn't mean that you're in agreement with their behavior, and it doesn't mean that you are going to disperse rescue. So instead, you're going to take this stance. You're going to say something like, I am on your side always, and I won't apologize, but I won't apologize or make excuses for your behavior anymore, nor will I make it easy for you to stay the same. I've always heard that that's our process of spiritual growth is because God loves us just the way we are. He loves us just the way we are, and I've talked about that in earlier segments. But He loves us too much to leave us exactly as we are. And that's why one of the beautiful things about spiritual growth is the emergence and the transformation that you become a new creation in Christ. And from here we venture into today's segment and begin with resource number 5, your words. If you've never had a confrontational conversation with someone, Townsend strongly advises role-playing with someone in your personal Delta Force, someone from within your safe and sane resource group. So what this means is that you prepare ahead of time. You prepare ahead of time. Now, we've all had confrontations. We've all had disagreements. But a confrontational conversation with someone means that you're going to address those issues, but you're not going to argue. You're not going to react. You're going to appropriately respond. And Townsend is a firm advocate for preparing ahead of time to have these difficult conversations. Ephesians 4:15 advises us to speak the truth in love. And speaking the truth in love still has to do with confronting, giving feedback, and asking for change. So as you prepare, consider these aspects. First of all, your tone and your content. Be warm and speak from experience. Talk from the heart and convey that, again, you are for her, you're for him, you are for your button pusher, and the relationship between you. But use I instead of. You definitely don't want to say, you're always angry with me, or you need to stop. Instead, consider saying things like, it seems to me, again, that's that I statement. It seems to me that you're angry with me often, and it's difficult for me to be close to you. Consider the content of your words. Affirm the good and help them listen from a loved position rather than from a guarded one. And that's again why you want to use the me statements. If you're really pointing out them, their, and you're using the word you, they're going to become defensive. They're going to become on the defensive, and they're going to become guarded. You're wanting to say, again, I'm on your side, I'm for us, I love you, and I want things to be good for you and for us. We need to have this conversation because we're having some rough times, or we've had some rough times, and I want them to be better. All you want in this conversation to talk about is the problem. You want to talk about the problem in order to work to solve it. Let your person know this. Tell them that you're looking for a solution. Let them know that by looking at it. Cannot get it out of the way. We can't get it out of the way. We can't remove. We've got to remove whatever it is that is coming between you and hurting the relationship. So you need to let them know that. Let them know that it's hurting you and that you want it resolved. Your goal is a good life of closeness together. Ask, does this make sense? And then be quiet. Don't talk. Be quiet and hear them out. Let them talk. Allow them to say what they need to clear out their internal conversation. Now, you know that very often and it's not a good way to have conversation, but when you're having a conversation with someone, you're very often thinking about not what they're saying, but what you're wanting to say in response. And in this situation, Townsend says you need to let them do that. Not interrupting you, however, once you've said what needs to be said, you've told them that you want to work things out, you need to let them say whatever it is that's in their heart. And by doing so, you may also hear something from their point of view that might be helpful. It could give you some insight. Not to be manipulative, but Townsend says that the last person to, in his words, show their cards tends to be more in control. Again, the last person to show their cards tends to be more in control. And so that's why what you want to do is you want to listen emphatically, you want to be still and seek to understand the other person's opinion. Recognize valid points presented. When they say something that makes perfectly good sense, or you in all honesty have to admit, you know what? And sometimes those are the things that really hit a nerve. The things that we want to react to, there's a lot of truth in those things. And so what you need to do is be willing when a valid point's presented, if your conscience or something within you feels they've got a good point, be willing to say, I think you're right. Don't hear them out forever though. Here's the thing. When you think you've gotten it and that you understand their perspective, their point of view, and they're not winding down, if they are continuing, then they're continuing, maybe even escalating, maybe then they start venting. What you need to do is say something like, I think I get your end of it. I think I get your end of it. State the problem, make it direct and simple. State how what they are doing affects you and others. What message may they be sending their children, for example, if it's where there's a situation of estrangement or alienation? Maybe you've extended an olive branch. You've attempted to resolve the situation to make peace. Maybe it's between you and even a child. Maybe it's between you and your mother. You have to consider there's a very real point in that you're setting an example for your children. And so you don't want to say this in a way that is very derogatory, but yet, isn't it true? Children model behavior they see what their adults do, what their parents do. I've often heard there's a Jewish proverb that says that what the mother did, the daughter does as well. Frame the problem in terms of what can be seen, what's observed, what can even be measured. What is not, however, you don't want to say why. You don't want to say why. Asking why usually ends up coming across as confrontational. State the problem's effect. Continue to present the problem in terms of we, how it hurts the we. How is it hurting the family? How is it hurting the relationship? How is it hurting the workplace? Watch your attitude and be sensitive to theirs. Don't be condescending. Don't be contemptuous. Any tones like that need to be avoided. Are they being polite, but are they cold and unavailable? Polite, but still cold and unavailable. Be aware of those things, their attitude and yours. Is there a subtle shift of mood when you disagree? Recognize those things. But you don't want to seem abrupt. Own your stuff. Sincerely own and take responsibility for what you've done to make things worse. Remember, there are both sins of omission and commission. It's a sin when you do something you know to be wrong, but also when you know what the right thing to do is and you fail to do that, maybe because you're being prideful or stubborn or just refuse to forgive. Well, that's also sin. Embrace humility. Townsend reminds readers that this is the best place in the world to live. God and reality reside within humility. Don't keep score. It doesn't matter who's the major or the minor contributor to the problem. That doesn't matter. Let go of the tit-for-tat thinking or demands for equal apologies or wanting to make sure that you get the last word in. That's the tit-for-tat. That's been tit-for-tat for me. I personally, that's something that I have to, even when I feel that I am 100% right and I want to make sure that the person that I'm having a disagreement with or that I'm wanting to repair a relationship with, a situation, I have to be very careful that I don't keep insisting that they get my point, because that's where the tit-for-tat comes in. Request change. Speak from what you want and need. I want you. I need. Is it possible? Could we? Those are the ways to frame and request change. Don't get stuck in a confrontational pattern. Don't go on and on over a laundry list of behaviors and issues. Instead, say what you want and what you need. Are you asking something that your person is able to do? For example, are you dealing with drug abuse or depression? It's possible that in situations like that, and in other situations, you may not really be able to tell what goes beyond a simple choice on the part of your person. What are they really able to do? And what are they not prepared? What are they not prepared for emotionally, mentally, or physically? Have they admitted that they have a problem? If they've admitted that they have a problem, you're taking a step in the right direction. But if not, getting some admission at this point may be enough. Maybe that's all that you should ask for at this particular time in the situation. Be prepared to deal with deflection. Deflection is when someone chooses to either deny, minimize, rationalize, or blame someone else for their own behavior. I've heard it referred to as blame shifting. Doing this signals that you have a second problem to deal with, besides the issue you're presently bringing up. Use these approaches to help you get through these deflections. First, hear out the excuse or blame and refocus on your request for change. You can say something like, I understand, or I'd like to talk about that sometime, or we'll come back to that in a minute. But for right now, I'd like to get back to my request for now. By this time, you've already listened, you've considered, you've heard, and you've owned your behavior, the contributions you've made to the problem in this relationship. So you've already recognized those things. You've owned those behaviors. So Townsend reminds readers that that open season on you, it's over. It's over until another time. So if your button pusher continues to resist taking responsibility for their behavior, shift the focus to the resistance and make that the problem. It's time to say something like this. I'm feeling pretty helpless right now. Every time I attempt to show you that you're whatever it is, whether it's their anger, their distancing, their ignoring you, blowing you off, or dishonesty, any of these things is a problem for me. When I tell you that these things are a problem for me, you either blame me or tell me that I'm overreacting, having a pity party. I've heard that one, especially with the issue of time. And as you get older, I think you realize the value of time and the value of the time that you have with loved ones, and that time means a lot. And when you insist that your loved ones make time for you, I've had it say that, well, you're on a pity party. And it's not a pity party. But again, make excuses. They'll start using these things as excuses, or they'll get angry. This isn't productive for either of you. So you go back to, I'm becoming aware that no matter what it is, I can't talk about problems with you in a way that solves them for us. I can't imagine that this is pleasant for you either. Can we work on that as the problem for now? So again, what Townsend says is, if there is still so much resistance and they're not taking responsibility for their behavior, then make that the problem. Put aside whatever the other issues were that you were trying to have them take responsibility for and address, and instead focus on the resistance to take responsibility. This transfers the responsibility for receiving feedback on them. So tell them, I need you to tell me how to tell you the truth. How can I do that in a way that you can feel okay about hearing it? And consider using the reasonable ideas they offer. Try to use this approach as an opportunity to diagnose the character of your difficult person. For example, consider, are they ultimately touched by your vulnerability, your ownership, your love and reality? If so, they probably don't require much more pressure. You should be able to tell if they're showing some sensitivity to the fact that you have been vulnerable, that you have taken ownership, that you have shown them love, but yet address the reality of your situation. All they need at that point, if you do see that, is encouragement to stay in the process of change. But if they're not, if they're insensitive to your vulnerability, if it hasn't made any difference that you've taken ownership, if the love is not reciprocated, or at least you feel they recognize the love, then maybe they're going to be more motivated by what Townsend calls the pain-pleasure principle. More motivated by that than empathy, because you've been trying to gain their empathy. Consider the limits and the boundaries you need to impose, and warn them that limits may be coming. It is a gift and a blessing to give someone a chance to change by warning them. Townsend says that forgiveness is about yesterday. After you've extended forgiveness, you need to protect tomorrow. It's time to cross the line from words to action. So you must now add weight to your words. Resource number 6, your actions serve notice. Proverbs 17:10 says, "A rebuke goes deeper into one who has understanding than 100 blows into a fool." This motive, the motive here is to keep in mind, again, is love for the person and the relationship. And it's time to draw a boundary, even though, again, your motive is love. Love for the person, love for the relationship, but you've got to draw a boundary. That line you draw, which defines things, it tells your person who you are and who you're not, what is your responsibility and what isn't. These are the suggestions offered by Townsend. To serve notice to your button pusher, you may want to consider using these words. Again, I am for us in both having freedom in this relationship, and I am against one of us controlling the other. Or say something like, I will put up with whatever it is you're willing to put up with, but I won't put up with, again, you're clearly defining the parameters. At this point in the situation, consequences serve to back up and enforce boundaries. So there needs to be either the presence of something undesirable or the absence of something desirable introduced into the equation. Let me say that again. So when you're seeking to enforce the consequences, right, and enforce your boundaries, you need to either take away something that is undesirable or add something that's undesirable or take away something that is desirable. And you need to introduce that into the situation. And then make sure you determine appropriate consequences. The best ones are a good and deliberate fit to both the situation and the person. Townsend suggests the following. Match the severity. You don't want to overreact or underreact. The time should match the crime, right? We've all heard that. And when you do the crime, you do the time. But it needs to match. It's easy to get things out of perspective. You're so close to and affected by the difficult person that sometimes it's easy to, what Townsend says, to swat a fly with a nuclear bomb. So because of that, sometimes there's long-standing resentment and hurt that can get in the way and again cause what Townsend says to swat a fly with a nuclear bomb. So you need to stay in balance and you need to keep things matched. Keep your motives pure. Townsend believes and has found in his years of family counseling that your button pusher has some sort of dependency on you. They need you or something that you have or something that you provide. At some level, you matter. And that has meaning to your button pusher. So seek to understand the leverage you do have. And I'd like to read from his book before we close on all of the things to consider. And these are the things that you may not even recognize are important, something that you're giving your button pusher that you can use as leverage. It may be acceptance of his faults. It may be warmth toward her, or just the emotional presence with him, maybe affirmation of the relationship, or encouragement to help her move ahead. It could be support for their struggles, or affection for her, interest in his world and his life. Your physical presence in the room with someone, that may make a difference to them. Empathy for their pain. Maybe it's cooking, cleaning, organizing, or doing chores, or fixing things around the house. Maybe the fact that you make the home a pleasant environment, attending to her felt needs. Maybe it's space and quietness around him. You provide that for him. Maybe it's respect for what is respectable in her, in your button pusher. Maybe spontaneity to give them life, entertainment to help them enjoy things, humor to help him with perspective, dependability to give her someone to rely on, structure to help organize him, task abilities to be available to her. Maybe you provide friendship and social activities that are enjoyable. Maybe it's your practical thinking to help this person with their dreams and ideas. Maybe it's financial support and resourcing. Maybe it's planning to give focus to their future or wisdom to give them direction. It can be feedback to help them stay on track, insight to help him be aware of situations, depth to bring her into the inner world of life, creativity to help him see things in a different light, solutions that she has not seen to her life problems. And because you're in the situation, you're helping her to become more aware of that. Maybe it's a social system and setting that matters to him, spirituality, which grounds her to God and her faith, the cultural tradition of marriage, which anchors people, family ties, which give your person a sense of rootedness and belonging, living together in the home, which keeps him from loneliness. So we often have to recognize, and it really takes a lot of insight, to recognize what it is that we actually contribute. Help us to understand the leverage that we do have. Well, we've run out of time for today's segment. I hope that you'll join us next time when we continue to talk about the strategies that Townsend knows will work for you to help build and regain and improve your relationship with your button pusher. Until next time, unless we're raptured, see you next time. Thanks for joining.